So here we are. In my infinite wisdom, I ground the bolts off that held my bumper on. And what I found was that, let's see, this is the rear hole for the bumper mount, and that's the forward hole for the bumper mount. And it has this funky, special, super awesome nut that is fastened on the inside, and it's sort of a press fit in here. And I tapped it out, no big deal, but that's pretty well stuck in there. I'm pretty sure I can't get it out. Likewise, or similarly, this one tapped out, but threads are stripped completely. So they had a nut on the other side, and the reason this is because the gas tank is occupying, this void here. And as you can see on the inside, there's very, very, very little room. In fact, this member is bulged here just for access for the screw once it's through. So my fix is to take these 9/16 grade 8 nuts, which happen to be a 7/8 wrench size. They fit rather nicely in there, but I don't want to weld them in, especially not from this side, because then as they're tightened, they're going to pull on this surface here rather than grabbing back in here to pull the chassis and the bumper together. So my fix is I'm going to weld on washers like so that I can have something to capture the chassis. However, that leaves too much. In an ideal world, I would grind a hex hole in this washer and weld it at the proper depth, but I'm going to cheat and just capture that, and that should give me just enough nut exposed to be captured in the chassis, and then still provide, clamping force on the proper side of the frame rail with this spacer here. So I'll glue all this together with my BuzzBox stick welder and see how it goes. I'm hoping the zinc plating doesn't mess with the welds too much, not that it matters. But I'll get it glued together and see if it works. Don't judge me, but that was dumb. Yeah, zinc plated, not good to weld. I'm sure anyone who knows anything about welding could have told me that. Also, these work better when they're kept in, heated, dry storage, no humidity. It's, yeah, not exactly dry outside, and my welding stuffs is right by the door, so I'm sure it's accumulated some moisture. So yeah, that's ugly. I ground it. It's not even complete, but whatevs. Good enough for government work or something, maybe. This was 6011. It worked okay. I couldn't get the 7018 to strike an arc continuously. The 6011 worked just fine. Made a mess. I mean, splatters, as you can tell. But I have run into a snafu where if I happen to have some tubing, I forget what size this is, probably 1-inch nominal electrical conduit, and it fits nicely right over the top of my 9/16 nut. However, it doesn't go on all the way, and I want to press it on the rest of the way so that way it doesn't come off and it seats all the way down to the bottom of the washer not under the force of the bolt I'm going to install in it. So what I'm doing is taking a 7/8 impact socket with six-sided, and I'm going to run it through the press like so, and it'll press it on just like the other one that I've conveniently already installed, sort of. So it'll be a nice tight snug fit. That ain't coming off, well, under normal use. Anyway, seems to work. Threads are okay because I missed them when I was welding. So all should be good. Get these installed. It was a little bit tricky getting it in. Gotta kind of get it lined up and then tilt it kind of down in, like so, to get it to slide in. And that seemed to work. It's not quite as deep as I'd wanted it, but it should be okay, I would think. So future notes, maybe don't discard or find the proper nuts or modified nuts that came with the truck and leave them in there, and or if they're broken, go get new ones from Ford if they're still made, because this cobbling is kind of excessive and I would rather avoid it if I can in the future. All said and told, this actually worked out way better than I thought. So it's not tightened yet, and I don't think it's fully assembled on the other side, but the setup here is I've got everything so that the unscrewing happens on the outside. So this one, because the nut's fixed on the inside, this comes unscrewed here, so this is where I'm going to have, you know, it's readily accessible when everything's put together, including the bed. So these two are accessible from out here. Worst case scenario, I have to slide some form of wrench in, probably from the bottom, to hold that bolt in place, but even still, it wasn't the end of the world to do. Likewise, the bolt on the bottom is no more light. Oh, bummer. Anyway, so the bolt on the bottom, when I get it all dressed up, I'm going to have the washers and nut on the bottom, because they were on the top when I took this apart, and it was just a nightmare. So I ground the heads off because they were all rusted together anyway. So that's how I'm doing it. Probably hit it with a coat of primer when I'm done. The brown rust colored primer. Blends in that way. That seemed to work out okay. Yeah. The bumper has never quite truly been level and even, but still, I think that's a result of that being bolted back here rather than welded, among other things. Anyway, I'm not sure where this bumper came from. I think it was a factory option. I've seen several of them running around on other trucks, but I don't know what it's called. And it's not really a bumper, it just sort of has this chromy, bumperish looking shell on the outside of a big 1/2-inch thick steel hoop that's held on with these coming off of the chassis. And I'm not really a fan of this setup because these two bolts are taking all the load, and this one is just sort of imaginary because even though that's a 1/2-inch thick piece of steel, it's very long and slender, so it's gonna buckle before it actually supports anything if this bumper were to rotate like this from super heavy load, which it did last summer. One of the rusty washers on the other side actually cracked, and then something tweaked. And my bumper was noticeably tilted. So that was no good. Hence, remounting it. So, hopefully that helps a bit. Oh, bolt lengths. These are 9/16 by 1.25 inches. Yeah. And they're perfect. That one's not fully tight. But no light. Oh, bummer. Anyway, it goes to just the end of the thing. There'd even be room for 1.5 inches or 1.75 inches long bolts back there, just because of spacing with the gas tank. When I took it off, I noticed there was at least that much room. Likewise, 1.5 inches, or no, 1.25 inches, 9/16 by 1.25 inches here, and then 1/2 inch by 1.5 inches down here, because that's extra thick relative to everything else. So needs the extra space for stuff, the washers and the nut. All of them are getting anti-seized. Hopefully that plus the zinc coating will keep them from corroding and catching too much road dirt. Speaking of road dirt, might hit them with some electrical tape just for extra cover. And if that's everything, then yeah, I'll just tighten them up and I'll be done. Hoorah! That's how I've mounted my bumper.